In 2020, because of COVID-19, traveling is out, but there's no reason you can't meet old and make new friends at an Agile conference. The Scrum Master Toolbox podcast teamed up with Tom Henriksen to organize the 4th year of the Agile Online Summit, and you can attend for free. There will be networking events, lots of talks on important topics, and 8 amazing keynotes from Mary Poppendick to Alan Holub, Jeff Patton, who's the creator of User Story Mapping, Neil Killick, who's a no estimates pioneer, Jeff Watts, author of Scrum Mastery, a great book for Scrum Masters, Jeff Gotthelf, Bob Galen, and our very own Markus Hammarberg, who's the author of the Bungsu Story, a great Agile transformation story. You can get your free tickets at bit.ly/SMAOS2020. All lowercase, all one word. Once again, bit.ly/SMAOS2020. All lowercase, all one word, and the link is also on the show notes. You can get your free ticket or opt for the full digital access that lets you keep all the conference videos forever. And for example, organize Agile learning sessions at work by watching those videos. You can get the full digital access at bit.ly/SMAOS2020. But don't forget, there will be lots of live networking events, so I'll see you at the conference floor. Hello everybody, welcome to our Wednesday Leading Change episode this week with Rachel Macasek. Hi Rachel, welcome back.
Hey Vasco, how's it going?
It's going well, and it's been a great week so far with you, and today we dive into something I'm sure you've experienced both in your manufacturing background jobs as well as in the Scrum Master jobs, and that's change, right? I mean, we're very often involved in changes. It could be individual changes, team level changes, or even organizational changes. So Rachel, walk us through one of those change processes that you were involved with, and walk us through the steps, the tips, the tricks, the techniques you learned back then and still use today.
Yeah, I think a lot of the companies that I've worked for at some point, would start and have this accelerated growth. And so there was always this need or question of, hey, how do we standardize? How do we do cross-team collaboration better? And I think some of the things that I've learned from those experiences is make sure that there's a common language across, like when you're going through and standardizing or even just in doing cross-team collaboration, that everyone is clear around like what things mean. Because very rarely do people in tech work at the same company for 10, 20, 30 years. A lot of people hop around, and I think everyone's seen a different style or flavor of Agile or Scrum. And so they have their experience of, maybe what something means. And so I think in some places we've even just like among Scrum Masters or coaches, what we started to do is have a glossary of here are some common words that people are throwing out. Portfolio, what does that mean? Or, depending on the tool you use, Epic, what does that mean? When we say an outcome, what does that look like? I think having something that just grounds everyone to have similar expectations, because like I said, different places you work, those all mean different things. And you want to make sure that you're speaking the same language, especially in a cross collaboration with other teams. So that's been super helpful. I think also being really clear on the why we're doing things. I think there have been times where we standardize just to standardize, and it's maybe caused more harm than good in the sense that the team hasn't felt like they've owned their process. And I think once teams don't feel like they own their process, they kind of check out a little bit. They kind of just sit back and say, well, you're just going to tell us how to do this. And I guess, we'll do it. And then retros become harder and all that fun stuff. So I think it's really important, especially as, Scrum Masters, if you're working in a company where there's larger organizational changes, it's okay to speak up and say hey, what's important about us standardizing that? versus maybe we create like, hey, this is the outcome that we're trying to see, and maybe state it more that way so that it gives teams flexibility into how they get that outcome. That's another thing that I think that's been super helpful. And then I think the last thing that I learned in my manufacturing days is be really careful about the metrics that you choose to measure things, right? A lot of the reasons, companies hire Scrum Masters or Agile coaches or whatever to do these sweeping organizational changes is because, they wanna ship more. And then they want to understand, like, how do we measure that? Because we want to make sure that we're doing the thing that we wanted to do. And in manufacturing, we had like a bunch of maintenance metrics that maintenance teams would report out on. I think it was like, oh gosh, I don't know, 20 or 30. And there's always a way to cheat a metric.
Always.
Always, right? And I shouldn't say a lot of plants were doing that, but there were plants that I would go into and it's their like matrix metrics are like green, green, green. And then you went out to the floor and their system performance of their line was like in the red every day. And you're like, how is that happening? Like, tell me more about that. Because that doesn't make sense in my mind. And so I think it's really important too, when you're talking about how are we going to measure how effective this is, or, really to understand like, why are we measuring what we're measuring, understand like the anti-patterns that those metrics can bring. And I think being honest too about, why we don't want our metrics to lie to us, because it's data that we can use to figure out where other opportunities are. I think that's something I used to talk to people at the plants that I would visit when I was in manufacturing, and something I talked to teams about too today. It's like, yeah, you can cheat the metrics and you can make yourself look awesome, but I want our metrics to be truthful so that we can figure out like, hey, where are maybe some gaps, or what are some opportunities, or where are we constantly getting blocked by something that we need, maybe help with. If we can't communicate that, and if we can't reflect on our data accurately, we're just going to have a lot harder time, having those conversations. Yeah, so I think those are kind of the things that I've, had in previous industry experience, and that I've learned throughout too with organizational stuff is, yeah.
So glossaries and sharing the purpose, or the why, and the metrics. Well, one thing that is rather important for me to ask is, how do you actually get people to start talking about that glossary, that why, and those metrics? I'm sure you have, some approaches you've learned over time that kind of drive the discourse, the conversations to start tackling these important aspects you just shared with us. So what are those tips, Rachel?
Yeah, I think, to be honest, I think a lot of it is one-on-one conversations, which is a lot of work. And I totally get that. But I think in a group setting, right, you can say like, hey, this is what we're doing. Like, hey, we've got this glossary page out on Confluence, or here's why we're doing it. And you're talking to your team, and you're going to say, do you have any questions? And there's going to be like crickets. Probably. Or maybe, like the one person that always asks questions, will ask a couple of questions. I think having one-on-one conversations is super important. And usually I found in one-on-one settings, especially with engineers, they have lots of questions. They're curious, maybe even skeptical. And so I think it's really important to set up time with them, and whether it's like 10, and it doesn't have to be like, let's have an hour-long chat to talk about how you feel about this, right? That's probably not going to make them super excited. But I think just 10, 15 minutes to just say like, hey, any questions on this, anything that's confusing. You can even lead by like, here's how I think this might impact our team. What do you think? Or what are you nervous about? What concerns you? Asking those types of leading questions so that you can start to have that conversation one-on-one with them. That's usually where I found like you get a lot more momentum around, shouldn't say momentum, but engagement around like what's happening not only at the team level, but how, the organizational changes are affecting the team or might affect the team.
In the end, it is all about those conversations, indeed.
Yeah. It's a lot of, and some people are like, oh my gosh, but I have, a team of X amount of people. That's so much. But I think doing that work up front builds not only like builds the trust, which is super key, but I think it also gives you as a Scrum Master a lot of insight as well that you're probably just not going to get in a group setting.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that, Rachel.
Yeah, no problem.
Leading change is one of the core skills we must acquire, but it is only one of the steps towards our success as Scrum Masters. Tomorrow, on Success Thursday, we will talk about how to define success for the Scrum Master role, we'll cover tips on how to measure your way to that position, and most importantly, how to develop that focus on continuous improvement that is as important for Scrum Masters as it is for teams. See you tomorrow. We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.